Hello and welcome to Oregon State University Farm to Fork webinar series. My name is Sherry Cole. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. I lead the Food Science and Technology Department's Sustainable Food Manufacturing Program. First, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. We know you have a lot that competes for your attention and time, so thank you. Our intention with this series is to really bring stories about how our food systems work and all of the complexities, as well as how they're changing in positive ways, and in particular, the people who are behind that change. Our food system is really diverse, and so our goal with the series is also to bring you the kinds of stories that reflect that diversity. So before I introduce today's speakers, I just want to briefly run through the logistics. First, we're recording the webinar, and it'll be posted later on our Farm to Fork website. We also want this to be as much of it as a conversation as it can be. So we're interested in your thoughts and questions. So you'll see the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. So throughout the presentation, if you have questions, please add them there. And if you see questions that interest you, you can upvote those, and then those will rise to the top of the list. So with that, it's my pleasure today to introduce today's presentation, Driving Productive Change, the Dairy Industry's Model, and the Implications for the Food Industry. So please join me in welcoming Ann Goetze and Julie Rentsch.
Thank you, Sherry, for the introduction. This is Ann Goetze. Both Julie and I are happy to be sharing today a bit about our organization and the work that we do. But before we fully roll, I have to admit that we're a little bit humbled and grateful that Sherry considered us worthy. We think the Farm to Fork presentation is a strong addition to the lineup of resources that OSU Food Science and Technology offers to the food community. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and strap in for a ride because we've got some great stories to tell. The goal for our presentation is to share models of collaboration that have driven productive change in the dairy industry. We hope to inspire you to develop some of the same networks and relationships to achieve your goals, whatever industry you are in. So just a quick check on who we are. I am the Executive Director of the Oregon Dairy and Nutrition Council, and Julie Rentsch is our most fabulous Business Development Director. Let me tell you a little bit more about our organization and who we are as the Oregon Dairy and Nutrition Council. Our origins trace back in Oregon to as early as 1918, when the Oregon Dairy Council was created to promote the benefits of dairy nutrition. The Oregon Dairy Products Commission came along a little bit later via an act of the legislature creating commodity commissions in 1943. These two organizations merged in 1985, and in 2016, we all came under our new name and branding of Oregon Dairy and Nutrition Council. We receive oversight from the Oregon Department of Agriculture as part of the Commodity Commission program. Our funds, however, are our own. We don't go to the legislature for funding. We're governed by a board of directors, 6 producers, 1 processor, 1 public member, and 2 ex officio members, one of whom is Lisbeth Goddick. And if you don't know Lisbeth, you should, because she is truly amazing. And we're very grateful for her support on the commission. In Oregon, there are 23 agricultural and commercial fisheries commodity commissions, and we all work a little bit differently and are funded a little bit differently, but our purposes are to advance our own industries as well as Oregon agriculture as a whole. And we do that through generic promotion, research, and education. Oregon Dairy and Nutrition Council is also part of a national dairy research program, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. Our work in Oregon and across the country it works to build consumer trust and dairy sales. You can read our program areas here. We have staff that lead each of these areas. And indeed, we do collaborate even within our own team to achieve our strategic goals each year. That just goes to say that we do practice what we preach. Our funding is 97% comes from assessments that farmers pay. 15 cents per every 100 pounds of milk. And to give that a little context, it takes the average cow about a day and a half to produce 100 pounds of milk. The other 3% of our funding comes from a processor assessment, and it all adds up to annual income of about $2.7 million. And our program is referred to on the national level as the checkoff because it's the money that's deducted from farmers' milk checks. So let's look a little bit more into the dairy checkoff program nationally. Can be very, I say often that in the dairy industry, we specialize in being complicated. There are many entities, many names. DMI, Dairy Management Inc., is the centerpiece. You may or may not have heard of Dairy Management Inc., but it's the names and organizations across the bottom of this slide that are more visible and you may have had some interaction with. Certainly on the nutrition research side, National Dairy Council has been a leader, and National Dairy Council has been around since 1915. So we came along a little bit later. Julie's going to talk a little bit more later about the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy. That is another example that's relevant for today. Within this network, we're organized as state and regional checkoff organizations. You'll see that Oregon is a state-based organization, which fits our ethos. After all, this is Oregon. We are progressive, independent, and diverse, and on the West Coast. But we work collaboratively within our own system and within our own team across the United States. Now for a bit about dairy farming in Oregon. Also diverse, our strength is in our 170 dairy farms and about 125 dairy cows. The number of cows in our state has been consistent over time. The number of farms has been declining. As you can imagine, there's more consolidation, and certainly we have some of the same issues that other agricultural industries have with consolidation and older farmers. Herd diversity, our dairies are located across the state, concentrated in Morrow County, Tillamook County, Klamath County, and Marion-Polk counties. And herds range from 20 cows to over 30,000 cows. We believe that all of these farms have a place in our food system, small and large. So we're about 1% of milk production nationally here in Oregon, but we are in the top 10 consistently, if not top 5, for milk quality. So we're very proud of the work that our farmers do to produce, to take good care of their cows and to produce safe milk. Another important point is that 99.9% of milk from cows in the United States is free of any antibiotic residue. So our cows produce about 2.6 billion pounds, or about a little over 300 million gallons of milk. And that milk is made into the amazing cheese, ice cream, yogurt, sour cream, cream cheese, cottage cheese, whey powder, and of course, milk, all the products that I hope you all know and love. And of course, milk naturally contains 13 nutrients that are important for optimal health and wellness throughout life. But also very important, dairy contributes to our economic well-being here in Oregon. You can see the total number of jobs, total economic impact, both through direct and indirect impact. Another important note is that we are consistently in the top 5 agricultural commodities by farm gate value. Sustainability is and has always been job one. We say that dairy farmers are the original or the OG environmentalists. We have 4 farms in Oregon and 4 dairy companies that have been recognized by the the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy for Sustainability awards. And we could do a whole nother session to tell you all about that story. But important to know is that Dairy farmers have evolved the way they farm. We are having a far smaller impact and footprint on our planet. There's some important statistics here that show less land, water, less manure generated, and fewer greenhouse gases emitted. And 98% of the dairy farms in the United States participate in the Farmers Assuring Responsible Management Program, which sets the highest standards for antibiotic and environmental stewardship, for workforce development, and for biosecurity. So we've made great strides, and Julie will tell you more about how we are not complacent, but we've set ambitious goals to continue to preserve the environment. So we practice what we preach. Our work is collaborative across multiple organizations in the agricultural space, locally, regionally, and nationally. And I would hope that some of these names and logo identities look very familiar to some of you. What's really important to know is that since 1918, dairy farmers in the US have funded pre-competitive programming designed to drive productive change. Much of that work does have collaboration at its very core. And that's our purpose today, is to share with you examples of how that works. We have 3 stories, one about OSU and the new creamery, more cheese overseas. Julie's going to tell you our export story. And then finally, net zero goals and the Pacific Northwest Partnership, a sustainability story that Julie will tell. And of course, we'll take questions at the end. So let's talk about the new dairy pilot plant at OSU. And this is not solely our story to tell. That's the point. It's about collaborative efforts to bring this apart. But let's see, let me focus myself here. I just get a little self-conscious because I've had a part in this, but I'm speaking on behalf of many who've gone before me. Withicum Hall on campus is undergoing a $51 million renovation, which includes this state-of-the-art creamery. What you may not have heard is the backstory on that. And as I said, it was originally drafted by Pete Kent, my predecessor, along with Elizabeth Goddick and a small group of dairy leaders. This group realized the potential for dairy in Oregon and in the Pacific Northwest and knew that there was work to do. And that work began under the umbrella of a program called Future of Dairy. And that started conversations with this simple question. Is there an opportunity to work together on a pre-competitive basis as an industry and as a region to help shape vision of what the future of dairy in the Pacific Northwest might look like? This program gathered farmers, processors, and industry leaders every 2 years between 2014 and 2020 with the belief that collaboration amongst stakeholders could better address challenges for the industry, look forward enough to anticipate challenges, and put in place the resources and infrastructure to lead to future success, which was defined as growth. Throughout these conversations, processing capacity, research support at OSU, future talent and workforce development were all identified as priority areas. And through this conversation, the Arbuthnot Dairy Center and OSU Dairy Foods program emerged as the natural home for this collective effort. This group of leaders pointed to the Arbuthnot Dairy Center as a nationally recognized center for dairy excellence in the region. A little bit of background, the Dairy Foods program mission is to promote the production of safe and high quality dairy products and support a healthy and sustainable dairy industry. The department aims to catalyze sustainable growth for economic vitality of the region's dairy sector. So when Future of Dairy began, elements of this were all in place, and they have continued to grow and thrive, in part due to the Future of Dairy, but also due to the great work of the faculty. But to really bring this center of excellence to life in the future, you know, it needed some money. So let's talk about when your goal is to build a new creamery, what that looks like. This same group of leaders activated the OSU Foundation and went back to the industry with an ask that was based in need that had been identified from within their very own ranks. Tillamook stepped up in a big way as the lead sponsor, which was a huge step toward turning the vision into reality. It opened the door for other funders from private industry and allowed the Dairy Foods Group to go to the university and ask for capital improvement funding to be prioritized in this area. And indeed, the university and the industry responded. Started with a $7 million project and is now a $51 million renovation of Withicum Hall. I want to also pause for a minute here and call out an additional catalyst from another collaboration that happened somewhat concurrently with the future of dairy. And that would be Business Oregon and the Oregon Food and Beverage Manufacturing Industry Roadmap. And again, Sherry, that's a topic for a whole nother Farm to Fork presentation, but I felt like it was important to recognize it here for its impact and some crossover with some of the leadership. So now let's take a little peek. Lisbeth provided these slides graciously to see what the new creamery might look like. And, you know, food processing facilities are often a lot of stainless steel and, you know, they're maybe not quite as glamorous to the outside world, but to a food scientist, this is dreamy. The new facility will be able to expand production capacity. There'll be more room for new product development and innovation initiatives. The team and faculty there will support industry with trial product promotion and production and train the next generation of dairy food makers on modern equipment. And then one final slide, imagine this, a Beaver Classic food court deli looking right out the windows at Withicum Hall to the Linus Pauling Institute. A student-produced foods in a student-run center. We'll look forward to meeting all of you there for an ice cream cone when the building renovation is complete this year or next year. So that's that story. On to Julie to talk about more cheese overseas.
Thank you, Anne. Hello, everyone. So the first of the two stories I'm going to share with you today focuses on exports. I've spent a large part of my career working in global markets. I experienced this on the brand side with Glenfiddich single malt and in market development here in Oregon with the Oregon Raspberry and Blackberry Commission. Now, Oregon produces more than 90% of the processed blackberries in the US. So when it comes to working together on things with similar groups elsewhere, you know, there really isn't that opportunity. It's just us out here on our own. That is not the case in dairy. There are dairy farms in all 48 contiguous states, and many of the large processors in our region span state borders. So there's value in figuring out how to work together to simplify processes and ensure that we're not duplicating efforts, especially when it comes to supporting our farmers and processors with their export vision. So here for the Northwest Dairy, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Utah, we all work together to ensure a thriving future. So we help with expansion efforts into new and profitable markets and make sure that we have dairy products ready to go as global demand for dairy continues to grow. Nationally, 1 in 6 tanker trucks of milk is already destined for export markets, And with our position on the West Coast, so near to so many major ports, we are primed for Northwest Dairy Foods to really capture our fair share of that growth overseas. So how did we recognize this export opportunity and create this multi-state partnership? Well, it took many conversations to start to answer this. And the conversation was kicked off by Pete Kent, the former executive director of the ODNC. And this was sort of the export team that I inherited 2 years ago when I joined ODNC. a group of state and regional teams, so the SRs, plus the U.S. Dairy Export Council at the national level. And together we have been chipping away at this opportunity on behalf of our regional processors. So yes, that might mean that some brands that compete with each other here in the domestic market are actually working together. But there's strength in numbers as you start to explore new markets, as you educate consumers and the trade about what makes your region and your foods so different and special. And we operate very much under the philosophy of a rising tide lifts all boats. So if one company can get in, that really helps pave the way for others to succeed as well. Outside of the dairy industry, we don't have to work alone there either. As 4 states working together, we have access to trade development resources through our various state departments of agriculture. Regionally, there is a group called WUSADA, which is the Western United States Agricultural Trade Association, and also national resources through the federal government, such as the USDA Foreign Agricultural Service and the Department of Commerce. So they are ready and able to help facilitate contacts in foreign markets and work alongside you in trade development activities. So for this team, with any team, you need a leader. And so the ODNC kind of spearheaded that for this group as we had staff dedicated to this and took on the bulk of planning and coordination. Market development activities can take many forms. All of these activities are expensive. So one of the big boosts to this project out of the gate was when we were awarded a federal state marketing improvement program grant through the USDA. And this was 3 years worth of funding against the export business plan for our region. And that tied us together through the first phase of this project. So we also guided the strategy and messaging development. So once we have the attention that we're looking for with the right people, what do we say? How do we communicate? And we also were responsible for making this happen through the gathering of information and resources. So data on the markets, data on consumers, and we also hired an export consultant to help navigate some of this as we look to build that pipeline through from the Northwest across the ocean and to a foreign market where we have never been before. We also serve as a communication link between all parties, ensuring that everyone on the team and all of the participating brands are well aware of what's going on. So now that you have a picture of how we kind of structured ourselves to work together, what did we do? Well, the focus on that first phase funded through the grant was on the development of the artisan cheese market to Singapore. So why artisan cheese? Well, it's a premium product at a high price point, so that helps set the tone for a positive reputation for our region. It's all about building that value and then bringing the volume online once you've got your pipeline to market confirmed. Singapore was identified as a great starter market, as a jumping off point for expanding into Southeast Asia, and they have many artisan cheese consumers there. But also importantly, they had no tariffs or labeling requirements, so any participating processors or product makers were able to take their existing products to tap into this new market opportunity. There's also a US DEC, US Dairy Export Council resource on the ground there. So they established a Center for Dairy Excellence to help support those of us who are over there working with market development in the region. So this project was ready to go in March 2020. So I'm sure you can tell what happened next. COVID took over the world. During the pandemic, things were slow. There was not a lot of market development going on. People couldn't get where they needed to be, and shipping was a nightmare. So time moved on. And so by 2022, we were ready to go once again. Having wrapped up kind of that first phase through the grant, in 2022, we moved forward with a program funded by our 3 state and regional groups and featured Ferndale Farmstead from Washington State, Tillamook Rogue and Face Rock from Oregon, and Beehive and Heber Valley cheeses from Utah. So here's a little glimpse of what we did. We anchored the program around the Food and Hotel Asia trade show in Singapore. We had a large display area there, and working also through US DEC and WUSADA, we added in some additional activities for more interaction and better connections as we built relationships in the market. So they helped us with a reception and one-on-one meetings with targeted potential buyers. After the show, we also did some follow-up activity with that same importer buyer group to further move the conversation along. So how did it work? Well, fortunately, it went the way that we had planned and hoped. 2 brands are now working with a US-based export partner who's facilitating that pipeline and consolidating a shipment of cheeses with other refrigerated products going to the region. And the first pallet actually arrived in Singapore on January 5th. Different plans for marketing the support to help seed these new brands into the marketplace are in discussion, so there'll be more movement there. And we're also continuing to have conversations about what version 3.0 might look like for our various states to continue to work together on this. Also exciting in the state of Oregon is the new Oregon Food and Beverage Export Alliance. So this is also a conversation initiated by Pete Kent, and it's coordinated through OSU. And it features several representatives from export commodity groups here in the States. So blueberries and potatoes are on board, and there's also some industry experts that sit on this team. So the aim of the group is to help facilitate the process for small to medium-sized food and beverage makers in Oregon who want to export but maybe aren't sure where to start. So it can be that one-stop shop for everything that you need to start to educate yourself and to learn about the export landscape. So this initiative has been largely in the advisory group and development stage, and for 2023, we're looking forward to a year of action. So ODNC is proud to join this alliance and help make things easier for Oregon food and beverage makers in any category to export their products overseas. And the last collaboration or last story I'm going to share with you has to do with the hot button topic of sustainability. As Anne mentioned before, dairy farmers are the original environmentalists. They are stewards of the land from one generation to the next and are responsible for producing healthy, nutritious foods. It's a responsibility they take very seriously. So knowing that they need to be part of any solution to the environmental challenges that we now face, the dairy industry has come together to work towards zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, which is an initiative that they're calling net zero. As we know, agriculture does contribute some greenhouse gases to the landscape, and dairy farming specifically is responsible for about 1.9% of that total picture. And even though 1.9% sounds like a small part of the problem, dairy wants to play its part in being a large part of the solution. So to do that, the dairy industry has set some environmental goals, achieving greenhouse gas neutrality, optimizing and maximizing water use. So dairies already reuse the water many times at the farm level. So it can be used through different tasks on the farm and finally collected and used to irrigate crops and return nutrients to the soil. They also want to improve water quality in the communities and regions where both farms and dairy processing facilities operate. So reaching these goals is going to require an industry-wide effort. The Net Zero Initiative is that collaboration of dairy organizations that are going to get us there. So they're figuring out what to do, how to measure the different results of different programs, and how to incentivize everyone at all levels of the food chain to implement proven programs that are going to deliver success against these goals. Nationally, the work of Net Zero is being guided by these 6 organizations, with the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy leading the way. And they didn't come to the table alone. They brought with them national level partners. The companies that you see here, from McDonald's to retailers like Albertsons, represent more than 90% of the food and drink industry in the US. Everyone is committed to making net zero happen at the national level, and everyone has the part to play in making this happen in their own region, their own state, and even getting their own house in order within individual companies themselves and at the farm level. So this brings us to how we bring the Net Zero Initiative alive in the Pacific Northwest. And we do that through the Pacific Northwest Partnership. This is a group that has formed from the SR groups, Dairy West, Dairy Farmers of Washington, and ODNC, along with the farmer groups in each respective state, and key processors and processor groups like Tillamook and Dairy Gold are also on board. So the conversation is really a forum that has been taking place over several different years. We meet together twice a year and rotate throughout the different states to gain a better understanding of the different challenges that each of us face. Dairy farming does not look the same everywhere you go. Oops. And making sure that we are celebrating successes as different initiatives and pilot practice and pilot projects are going into play. So a lot of this has been conversation so far, but again, 2023 is going to be about action. And so 1 year from now, we look forward to having some additional concrete results that are going to start to move us down the path that we need to be on. So those are our 3 dairy industry stories. For us, working together across dairy and the larger agricultural landscape is a big part of our success. And so we intend to stay the course with that through the work that we do. That work is grounded in collaboration. That's kind of been the buzzword today, but this information is not new. I mean, people have been working together to work towards their goals for a long time. There's an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And, you know, a more recent example, slightly recent, Henry Ford, who said that coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is a success. So we hope we've kind of demonstrated a little bit of how we do that in the dairy industry for you today, but also hope that we gave you a few things to think about for your own field of work as you think about your own challenges and opportunities ahead. So where do you start? You know, getting to know your own industry beyond the immediate customers that you serve. Chances are, if you're thinking things or have questions, someone else out there is thinking those things too. So ask around, you know, find your people, figure out what you can learn from them and what they have to offer. And definitely keep that conversation going, either within an existing forum, like a conference or industry event that's already happening, or start your own, which is how, you know, the Oregon Food and Beverage Alliance came to be, or how the future of dairy led to the new creamery at OSU. And when you're ready, of course, it's time for action. So keep sharing those ideas. If you need funding to move things forward, find it through grants or through private funding. And if you don't have all the information you need, look at commissioning the research that you want to get you there. So when you bring all of this together, we hope that you'll be able to drive productive change in your industry too. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for the presentation. It was really helpful. As a person who works with the dairy industry, I think it's easy to forget just the complexity of the system. So thank you for sharing that and kind of illustrating how that might be useful to folks who work in other parts of the food industry. So for those who haven't put questions in the chat, this is an opportunity. So please do, if you have a question to ask. I do have a few questions from offline. The first is, and I recognize this is a little bit of a difficult question, but you know, what do you think is different about the dairy industry that provoked it to organize in this way, to sort of identify shared priorities, think about how that would get funded and how collaboration might work?
I would say that it's, you know, it's 100 years of culture and doing this. And I think it relates to, and I don't really know for sure how different this is than, I'm thinking within agriculture, you know, farmers are deeply invested in their communities. I know certainly dairy farmers are, and I know farmers from other sectors are. And as much as they're scrappy and sometimes can be competitive to stay in business, they keep that big picture in mind. And so I think that leads them to be able to think bigger and unify as an industry. I do think the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy is fairly unique because it is all the national and international brands. I mean, that slide of logos that Julie shared is pretty amazing. And they are an active, vital group of food and dairy industry leaders. And they have all agreed. And they sometimes, you know, they'll have the conversation at the table about messaging, are we shooting inside or are we shooting outside? Are we bettering our industry or are we defeating ourselves?
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to add that, in addition to the fact that we've been doing this a long time, is the fact, just the mere presence of other people doing the same thing as us. So again, contrasting back to the work I did with blackberries, where we were generally on our own. When it came to this stuff, there wasn't other people processing blackberries in other parts of the country in a big way that we could tap into. And as with everything in agriculture, I mean, time is limited, funds are limited, and you want to be efficient with both those things so that you can really be successful.
Thank you. A question about exports. Can processors of all sizes participate in the exports work, or I guess what has to be true in order for processors to participate?
Yeah, so there's a lot of factors to consider. I think the first step of the journey is being new to export, right? Needing to educate yourself and learn the landscape, no matter the size of your business. But to be ready to export specifically, that needs to be part of your strategic plan of how you want to grow, whether you're looking at your same products to new customers. There are a lot of ways to achieve that objective, maybe domestically here before you start to look overseas for new products. I think the single biggest opportunity is for companies that are able to scale up production. You need to be able to meet this new demand that you're looking to create versus just finding home for stuff that you could sell elsewhere. So export development becomes an important part of your growth strategy along the path of growing your business. But first, it makes sense, and from a cost perspective and a complexity perspective, to start where you are, to work on your home marketplace, look to other marketplaces where you can implement what you've learned from that activity before you start to figure out if exports is the right next step for you. So there's no hard and fast rule about how many employees you need or how big of a budget you have to have, because there is funding available through all kinds of different programs. And the Oregon Food and Beverage Export Alliance is looking to lay all that out for everybody. So this can all be figured out in a very efficient way for businesses of any size to get on board with this opportunity.
Thanks. Rogue Creamery won a big award in 2019. Could you speak a little bit about that and what impact that's had, not just on their company, but potentially the cheese industry in the region?
So yeah, that's the World Cheese Awards, the premier award granting agency internationally. And Rogue Creamery had won for best blue cheese in prior years, but it was in 2019 when they won best cheese overall. And this story is absolutely best told by David Gremmels, and I hope everyone has the opportunity to hear it from David himself. But it was in Italy and they beat out a Parmesan cheese. So, and it was close, it was a tie. And interestingly enough, David wasn't there and heard about it when he was out tending his cows and the heifers that live on his farm. So absolutely, it has been a catalyst for the entire cheese industry in the United States. Absolutely took it to a new level to achieve that type of international recognition. We have seen certainly, and Julie can speak to this even more if we want to take time for that, but certainly that has driven a lot of interest in our work in Southeast Asia. I mean, who doesn't want to have the world's best cheese on their menu in Singapore, for example? And so as much as we've helped tell that story to help elevate the industry, we have seen great interest in American cheeses overall. And that, Julie, that makes me think of the American Cheese Society meeting that was here in Portland last summer. And I think you're the one to talk about that. So I'll pass to you.
Oh yeah, that is the American Cheese Society is sort of the national level organization for artisan cheesemakers in the US, providing them education and support and resources that as small cheesemakers, they cannot afford to participate in on their own. So to host that annual conference here in Portland, I think it's the first time it happened in over 20 years. So it was really a chance for us to shine a spotlight on what we do here and also to share this story and celebrate together the achievement of Rogue Creamery being the first US cheesemaker to be recognized as making a best of world class cheese. So that was, yeah, a major celebration event. And as you correctly pointed out, Anne, we also had a lot of great interest in our Pacific Northwest cheeses in Singapore when we were there, because we were sampling the world's best cheese at that particular show. So it all kind of ties together.
Excellent. And then just one last question. How has the increased availability of alternate based beverages, so milks, impacted the dairy industry, and what is the dairy industry doing in order to address that?
So we call them nut juice by preference. And the alternative beverages have a very small segment of the marketplace. They experienced some growth in the last 5 years, but recently we've seen some declines, despite some recent declarations or some recent exposure. Lots of exposure recently, lots of talk. Dairy products in the United States are in more than 90% of households. We know that many households have cow milk products in the fridge, as well as nut juices or alternative beverages. But we know that cow's milk dairy is in over 90% of households. We also know that dairy foods naturally, with the exception of fortification of vitamin D and vitamin A, but they naturally contain 13 nutrients that are very difficult to get in the quantity that they are needed for optimal health and wellness throughout life stages. So it's not, there are particular life stages where, you think about bone health in children, you think about cognition in the first 1,000 days, you think about avoiding sarcopenia in older age. Dairy nutrition naturally provides what we need. So that's our position on it. And if you read the ingredient list, and there's enough food scientists on this call, I think, to understand the amount of processing that milk and dairy foods go through compared to alternative products. Milk's milk, and it may have 3 ingredients, and that's because vitamins A and D are added, but we believe it's a naturally nutritious food and that it plays an essential role in a sustainable and resilient food system.
Excellent. Well, I thank you both for a wonderful presentation. Any closing comments? Otherwise, I'll wrap it up. So I want to thank you both. It gave people a lot to think about. And I want to thank those of you who attended again today for taking the time with us. We would love your feedback. These are only as useful as they really represent what you're interested in hearing. So you'll see a link in the chat for a short survey. Please take the time to give us your feedback. We appreciate it. The other thing is we do these monthly. And so the next one will be on February 17th, where we'll be talking about trends in more sustainable, flexible packaging. Packaging is one of the biggest priorities to the entire food industry. And so we're really excited to have an expert come and speak to us about that. So with that, I wish you all a great weekend, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.